Ministers, I suppose, first of all, I want to thank Sinn Féin for putting forward the motion, and I supported the motion, and I put my name to the motion on the basis that, as I think I said to you last week, Minister, the idea of dividing people has come across very badly with survivors. I've spoken to a number of survivors in the last week in relation to the redress scheme, and they're disappointed because they all came into this together. They all told their stories together. They all bared their souls in public and in private to tell people what had happened to them. And they didn't do it for any other reason other than they wanted to get, first of all, an apology from the state. And the second thing they were looking for was recognition for what they had gone through. And as one of the survivors said to me, you know, Seán, the first 6 months weren't grand, and then it turned after that. One day in one of these homes could have caused somebody as much trauma, as much anguish, and leaves as a big a mark as somebody there for 5 years or 6 years. So that's why I think that the idea of segregating people, categorising people, and dividing them has created a resistance to the redress scheme. And I know that it was well intended, it is well intended, this redress scheme. But I also take a different view when you talk about the cost of the scheme, because I don't believe the state should look at the cost as much as look at what it has cost in human terms to those people who were in these homes, the mothers and the babies, and the lives that they have led in the meantime, and how they've carried this burden for years, and how they've carried the anguish with them. And whether they were a month, a day, a week, or 6 years, the anguish and the pain is still there. And sometimes when we try to do something like this, to do something good, we sometimes get it wrong. And I would say, Minister, this whole redress scheme needs to be re-examined. We should not try and divide and segregate people. I think it's also important to realise that people, as somebody said earlier, people are getting older. The survivors are getting older. And a lot of the survivors have told me over the last 5, 6 years is that this is not about money. This is about recognition, and for the state to say, yes, I will try and do something for you. But when you say, I'll try and do something for you, but I won't be able to do anything for you because you weren't long enough there. How do we have to serve an apprenticeship, they've asked me, before they qualified? This is something that I think we have to look at and say, no, this is not what it's all about at all. This is about real, genuine people who have suffered more than enough. And I think even for us talking about it here, we're talking about events in the past, and we're not proud of them. But we have to stop talking about it, and we have to get the action done. We've got to give people what they require. They have placed their faith in the modern politics, the modern politicians, the politicians of today, to make sure that they get what they are deserving. And as politicians, and I think the motion has been accepted by yourself, Minister, but I think you have to go beyond that. It's not just accepting the motion and not opposing it. I think we need to see this redress scheme taken and broken apart, and as I say, put back together in conjunction with all the survivors and the advocacy groups, so that we create something that is going to be fitting for what we're dealing with. And it's something major in people's lives. And as Deputy Boyd Barrett spoke there about it, you know, the passion is there. And it's not a political thing. It's about everybody trying to do the right thing. And I think that's why we're here talking about it tonight, and that's why the motion is here. I would also take this opportunity to say that as politicians, you know, we've come across some things that we said that's not right. But one of the survivors, I was talking to him on Saturday, and he was saying, you know, Seán, he said that he was lucky. He was fostered out to a good family and a good home. And there are great stories there as well. So much so that he farmed the land for 40, 50 years, and then he was left the farm. But when it came to giving him over the land, he had to pay stamp duty at 7.5% because he was a foster child, as opposed to paying stamp duty at 1% if he was the son of the child. That's what he said. Seán, he said, we're being victimised everywhere we go. It's a family that were handing their son, despite the paperwork, the family farm. Even though he was fostered, it was a case that he had to pay 7.5% stamp duty. And when he tried to get it back, no, that was the rules. So I think we have to look at the rules and say, why are the rules there? They're not to victimise people, they're there to help people along. I think the other part of the motion that I think we have to look at, and it has been spoken about earlier, is to seek immediate and substantive recourse from the religious orders and the pharmaceutical companies to contribute to the state's redress scheme. I think we have to be strong on this, Minister. The reason I would say that is because the pharmaceutical companies played a part in all of this. They played a part in it, and they cannot just walk away or be let walk away. They need to own up to what they were at the time. And I've spoken to a woman who was in one of the homes in Cork lately, and she told me about, after having the baby, she was given a tablet, but she didn't know what it was for or what it is. She never found out. It's not on any medical history of her. So there are things that went on, and there was experiments that were being carried out for the benefit of the pharmaceutical companies without the knowledge or the express permission of the mothers or the children. So we have to also say to the religious orders, you need to own up as well. As a TD who went to school in Tuam, I think the Mothers and Babies Home was probably closed before I started secondary school in Tuam. But I do know a lot of people who actually remember it. And they remember how children were being segregated, going down to the classrooms in the schools, and they would be brought in after everybody was in the school, in the classrooms, and they would be brought out before anybody else would be let out. And one of them has said that by changing the redress scheme to having 6 months, nothing, and then after that you get something, what they're saying to me is, that's the same as when we were going to school. You were being treated differently, and now we're dividing and treating people differently. So I think we have to ensure that people, the survivors and their families, receive the recognition that they surely do deserve. They receive that state apology which we have already given, but I think it needs to be repeated many a time. And we have to show them respect. And we have to give them small restitution for what has happened to them. I don't think we can be selective, ministers. I don't think we can be. I don't believe that it would be the right thing to do. And as they've said to me, it's not about the money. And it's not about the money. It's about the people that suffered unjust experiences and probably undescribable in some cases. Finally, I would just like to acknowledge all of the work that you've been doing, ministers. But I think that this is a scheme that needs to be overhauled before it goes any further. We do not want to have any more anguish for the survivors. And I want to acknowledge all of the survivors that I have met and have written to me, and some of them have become friends, for the reason that they have done everything that they've been asked to do. They have been very polite, they've been very brave, and they have been, at times, gone through so much anguish in telling people and telling the public what actually they went through. It has been a watershed for them. I hope this redress scheme will become something that will be a watershed for this state to make sure that we do something right for these people. And finally, I would like to acknowledge the work of Catherine Corliss from my own town in Tuam, and for her family, who have gone through a huge journey with her as she has done all this work to the research to expose what was happening in Tuam. Tuam is not the only place, unfortunately. So I would say, Minister, we have an opportunity, and I would welcome your efforts in making sure the scheme is for everybody. Thank you.